Mark Bolan may have been glam's first teen idol, but our next king turned dressing up into an art form.
Is there life on Mars?
David understands the way rock music works. You have to upset and annoy the older generation. That's the way it goes.
Bowie's creation of an outrageous androgynous character on stage was accompanied by a sexual experimentation off it.
Got this big jacket on and I look like a big bull dyke, and he's like in these little whooshy pants.
He didn't just have the look, he also had the bullshit to back it up.
Step forward the chameleon king, David Bowie. Born David Jones in 1947, he was brought up in a much more affluent suburb than Bolan, but like him, he was a born exhibitionist. In fact, by the age of 17, the publicity-seeking teenager was on the nationwide Tonight programme.
Rebellion of the long hairs is getting underway. A 17-year-old, Davy Jones, has just founded the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Long-Haired Men. Now, exactly who's being cruel to you?
For the last 2 years, we've had comments like darling and can I carry a handbag thrown at us. I think it's just had to stop now.
Bowie was working as a commercial artist, but in his spare time he was recording as David Jones and the King Bees. Although it would be a few years and many transformations later before Bowie would hit the charts.
It's one small step for man.
In 1969, the world was gripped by the first moon landing.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Bowie rode the wave of public interest.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Releasing Space Oddity, which made it into the top 10.
Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. 10. Ground control.
Space Oddity was a sort of novelty pop hit, and at that point you wouldn't necessarily have said, this guy's going to go on to become one of the defining stars of this coming decade.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know.
He wanted to be a star. He wanted it badly. I remember him telling me that he was so focused on making it and making it big. That was important. He didn't just want to be an artist in a garret. He wanted to make an impression.
The problem was Bowie still looked a bit of a geek. It took a chance meeting with an avant-garde performer called Lindsay Kemp to sow the seeds of a more glamorous incarnation.
I had met David after a performance at the little theatre club in St. Martin's Lane, and it was kind of love at first sight. He began doing dance classes with me, and I introduced him, I think, to the wonders of the Japanese theatre, particularly the kabuki. I certainly gave him an awareness for movement and style. I helped make him glamorous.
Bowie spent 2 years performing mime, but it took another significant meeting, this time with a woman, to turn his dreams of fame into reality. American art student Angie Burnett.
Everything that David wanted to do, everyone had told him he couldn't. I was the person who walked in and said, yo, baby, you can do anything you want.
There's a starman waiting in the sky.
Angie was very useful to him, and she helped create the image of a cross-dressing rock star, which eventually led to Ziggy. She often looked like the female version of him. They both dressed ambiguously. He was wearing women's clothes, she was wearing men's clothes.
With Angie, David plunged into a more exotic performance art world.
The Andy Warhol and Pork connection was a really big deal.
Warhol's play Pork, with its cast of exotic drag queens, opened in London in 1971. Angie and David went to see it again and again.
Jane County knocked me on my butt.
Well, when I first met Bowie, he was kind of an introvert, very plain, and I do want to stress he was very plain, and then after Pork, he was not plain anymore. When we left, he cut his hair and painted his nails and shaved his eyebrows.
I bet that's what gave him the idea. It certainly wasn't my idea. I liked my eyebrows.
Most of the reasons that I do what I do is because I just like startling people.
Startling?
Yeah, something to do.
The cover of Bowie's 1971 album, The Man Who Sold the World, showed him dressing like Lauren Bacall.
He was considered at the time king of the freaks, but he actually was not king of the freaks. He was actually playing a part, good or bad, he took from real freaks. Like me, I'm a real freak, come on, I'm a real freak. I'm a transsexual, I'm a rock and roll, I'm crazy. Bowie was good at taking from real freaks and putting it into his characterization.
He realized that to get himself over, if he could make a big visual connection with people, then they would start listening to the music.
In 1972, Bowie sealed his stardom with the album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Fans flocked to see the leper messiah.
Oh, yeah!
Yeah, what's different about him, though, from any other rock and roll singer for you?
Have you ever seen how he looks?
Ziggy played for time, jiving us up. We were voodoo. The kids was just crash.
When he walked out on that stage in Earl's Court, he was beyond belief.
But he took it all too far. But boy, could he play guitar.
My mum took me to see David Bowie. I wasn't old enough to go on my own, I don't think. It's one of those concerts that I absolutely remember. And here he was, you know, the alien being incarnate.
Just to see this guy up on the stage in those outrageous clothes. People were spellbound by this guy, and the air was electric. It was one of those magic shows. Nobody'd ever done that before.
Now Ziggy played guitar.
The title track became an international hit, but David was determined to add another layer to his exotic image.
He was a pop star that revelled in talking about his open sexuality and his... No one had ever really done that.
Only 5 years after the laws against homosexuality had been relaxed, Bowie was the first mainstream star to openly flaunt his sexuality.
I remember the first time when you watched Starman on Top of the Pops and he put his arm around the guitarist, Mick Ronson. Now, that was a defining moment in pop. You know, the lead singer, dressed as he was dressed, you know, put his arm flirtatiously and protectively around the lead guitarist, and it spoke of something else. It spoke of homosexuality. You dare not even say it, you know.
I was the one who got very irritated about stuff like that. I had to say to him, no, we have a child. Do you think that perhaps the correct term would be a good idea to use, that you are bisexual?
Bowie was Ziggy for 2 major tours. Then in 1973, he shocked the fans by announcing Ziggy was no more.
Why are you so upset?
He's smashing!
As the chameleon king, David Bowie stayed one step ahead of his audience.
It's so clever to think up Ziggy and then come back as Aladdin Sane, which is a little different version of that character. And then a couple of years later, he's like a blue-eyed, white soul singer, as the person on the cover of Young Americans.
But then he's always taken risks all the way through his career. He's always done something, and that's what makes him so interesting.
Over 100 million albums later, David Bowie has stayed at the top through a process of constant reinvention.
I could escape this feeling with my charming girl.
He might tell you himself that it's his way of dealing with his paranoia and madness. You know, so many facets to him that depend on what angle you looked at him from, what you got out of him. Where that comes from, that's just one of those big mysterious questions that people love to ask, even though we all know you can't quite answer it.
While Bowie revelled in a series of roles, our next king